tell in English. So we are delighted to welcome you in Paris for this conference. I want to thank as well Students for Liberty for their support, especially financial support, which is very important for us to be able to do such events. So today we are going to talk, Yaron is going to talk to you about a topic about which the media and politics debate a lot, inequalities, and often I'd say with a lot of caricatures and quite obsessively. So certainly many here do not know you, and yet they should today. You are the president of the Iron Institute, but you also wrote books, such as the one with John Watkins, It Was Unfair, on inequalities, which essentially talks about the United States, but which basically could apply to all Western countries, especially France, I believe, and that I started to. You are also an entrepreneur. You might talk about it, and as far as I read, you have had an amazing life so far. So thank you for coming, and come back whenever you want. Mesdames et messieurs, Yaron Brook.
Thank you. Can we turn this off? It's in my face.
Oh yeah, of course.
So we are a small group, so we can make this less formal, I'd say, than normal presentation. So feel free to kind of jump in with questions or comments or issues or so. Kind of warm in here. So obviously, actually before I start, let me just say the Iron Institute's doing a conference in Athens in April. And it's going to be like 4 days. It's going to be fantastic. We're bringing a lot of speakers over. We're going to talk both about objectives of Ayn Rand's ideas, but also about the relation to Greek philosophy, because we'll be in Greece, so it'll be an opportunity to kind of go to the Lyceum, Aristotle's Lyceum, and Plato's Academy, and actually talk about the importance of those things. So I encourage you to apply for scholarships. If finance is an issue, and all of that will be available on the Ayn Rand Institute website, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So, we're giving out a lot of scholarships, so feel free to apply. It's very likely you will get them, and we want to make as many people as we can. So I expect there will be several hundred people there in Athens in April. And Athens in April doesn't get much better than that. Particularly if you've never been to Athens, it's a special place. All right, so as you mentioned, inequality has been a topic in the news. It seems like now forever. It really is only about 10 years that it's become such a big issue. You French are to a large extent responsible for that because you produced Thomas Piketty, who of course wrote Res Capital for the 21st century, and published it, and that created a real furor in the world. It became a best-selling book. I don't think very many people actually read the book, but they bought it. Everybody put it up on the bookshelf. It was important. You know that Amazon actually, when you download a book, they can track how many pages you read of it.
Can they?
Yes, and they actually published the best-selling books that are least read. And Thomas Piketty's book was #1, so I thought that was at least good. But Piketty basically makes the argument that the inequality, which is the gap between the wealthy and the poor, or the wealthy and the middle class, you have various measures of these things, that gap, whether in terms of income or in terms of wealth, he argues has really grown dramatically over the last 40 years, and that this trend is going to continue. Indeed, he makes an economic argument that it will continue forever, and that ultimately all the wealth in the world will be held by a few people. This is an argument that's exactly the same argument that Karl Marx made in the mid-19th century, that this was going to continue forever and all the wealth would be held by a few people. Didn't turn out correct when Marx predicted it. And the economic arguments that Piketty makes are, trying to be nice, silly. They don't stand up to water. They don't make any sense. But everybody has, and many economists have criticized him. So many economists, even on the left, have criticized him because economic arguments he makes are really non-economic. And yet, he has been incredibly influential. The world, overall, the world is obsessed with the idea of inequality and the idea of inequality being a problem. The world treats Piketty as if he is a rock star. I don't know if you've seen, but when he arrives in foreign countries, the presidents of the countries come out to greet him, red carpet, the whole thing, and he's just a pretty bad economist, and yet they treat him amazingly. And I think the reason is that he feeds into a narrative that people want to hear. He feeds into a narrative that certainly the people in power want to support or want to pretend at least, to tell people and present themselves as we will solve the problem. We can do things to solve the problem. So the argument is this has increased. And I'm not going to argue too much with the statistics that this indeed has increased, although many have argued with the numbers and challenged his statistics. The Financial Times did a whole story on this and surveyed on this, and they dug into the data and they found a lot of flaws and a lot of problems. A lot of economists in the United States are very skeptical of Piketty's numbers, and Piketty's, they kind of just the sheer numbers, whether it's grown, this so-called inequality has grown as much as people pretend. And then I'm going to make a bigger argument that does it matter? Who cares? I mean, my attitude towards inequality is, who cares? Why should anybody care? Why should anybody care what the neighbor is making? Why should anybody care what the guy across the street is making? What difference does it make morally, and what difference does it make economically? Indeed, I make the argument that there's reason to celebrate when people are very successful in a market. The bigger question when it comes to economic inequality is not how big is it, but what caused it. So my argument is if the income inequality or wealth inequality is caused by stealing, then it's bad. We all know stealing is bad. If it's caused by manipulating the government and getting favors from the government, in my book that's very much like stealing, and that's bad. If it's caused by production, if it's caused by entrepreneurship, if it's caused by trade, by selling a product that people actually want to buy and trade for, then it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. It is said that Putin might be the richest man in the world. He's got a lot of money in Swiss bank accounts. Where did he get it from? What did he produce? What did he create? What did he make? Nothing. So if he is the richest man in the world, it's because he's stolen. It's because he's confiscated it from people who actually did create and build and make. So this is the Russian people's money, if you will, the Russian entrepreneurial money. It's certainly not Putin's. That's bad. And if that you want to view as inequality, then that's a bad inequality. But I don't view it as inequality, I just view it as a crook. He stole the money, right? He's a bad guy. Inequality has nothing to do with it. So let's talk a little bit about how people perceive or people think about inequality. So, we all have different amounts of wealth, income, and people seem surprised by that, but it seems kind of obvious that we would, right? I mean, we're all different. If you leave us alone, if you just put us on a desert island and leave us alone, and you come back a year or two later, somebody comes a year or two later, are we all going to be the same? I mean, we're not. In no society does that happen. You know, some of us are motivated to achieve more, some of us are a little bit less ambitious. Some of us are really good at certain things, some of us maybe are more mediocre or not so good. Some of us are lazy, some of us are hardworking. We just achieve different things. In any kind of environment, when you have a classroom and you're teaching mathematics, does everybody get the same grade? No, even, you know, and not because, first of all, some people are better at math and some people are worse, but also because some people are lazy and some people are hardworking. So, nothing in life do we all score the same. So why would we score the same when it came to income and wealth? We're all going to be different at different jobs. Different jobs are worth different amounts in terms of the value, the impact they have on the world. But any two of us even doing the same job are not going to do it exactly the same. One person is going to be better. That's life. It's just the way it is. It's metaphysical, it's nature. It's not an issue of fairness or unfairness. It's an issue of this is how we are, this is how we're born. And this is the consequence of the choices we've made, the consequence of the character we have. So, if we have freedom, we'll never have equality of income, of wealth, of job performance, of grades in school. I mean, think about, you know, I get upset about basketball inequality. I don't know if you guys follow basketball, friends. It doesn't play in the United States, LeBron James. You know LeBron James?
Yeah, but we follow soccer mostly.
Okay, so let's say soccer. I'm pretty upset about soccer inequality, right? I want to be able to get on the pitch with Messi, right? And I want to be able to dribble past him and score a goal. And I want to be able to stop him. Equality. I want equality of soccer. Right? He's better than me. He's a lot better than me. I played a little bit of soccer, but he's a lot better than me. That's not fair. Based on all the inequality literature, based on Thomas Piketty, that's not fair. So how do we make me and Messi more equal? Yeah, we could break his legs. Absolutely. And indeed, that's the only thing you could do to make him equal. Right? Because you could train me, you could spend months and months training me up. I'm never going to be as good as Messi. Why? He was probably born with certain traits that make him a really good soccer player. I don't think that's the main part, but that's certainly part of it. Second, since he was this big, he's had a ball connected to his leg, right? Been playing, been practicing, been training. And he's taken it really, really, really seriously. His whole life is soccer. He's made himself the best player in the world. Maybe it's Ronaldo, but anyway, one of those two. Made himself the best player in the world. So it wasn't just he had genes. It was he had genes, he worked hard, and he really, really worked hard. I mean, the people who are at the best in the world at something really focus on it, really invest in it. He's got trainers, he's got scientists working with him to make him, to help him stay the best player in the world. And he's played a lot. So you got to practice, 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 practice. You can't make me as good as Messi, but you can make Messi as bad as me. And in that sense, the only way to make people equal is to bring them down. Is to bring them down to the lowest common denominator. There's no other way. And the only way to bring people down is by using violence. Breaking their legs. Well, how can we create equality of income? Well, we have to take money from people and give it to other people. But taking money from people is violence. It's no different really than breaking their legs. We think breaking their legs is so horrible, and it is. But, you know, you work hard, you spend your time being creative, being productive, investing, in yourself and what you do, just like Messi did playing soccer. You're trying to create a career, you're trying to be good at what you do, and part of the measure of how good you are is the kind of income you generate in any profession. You're trying to be the best that you can be and make more money, and then somebody comes around and says, but that person over there is not making as much as you, so we're going to take from you and give to them. That's like breaking Messi's legs. It's no different. My time, my effort is just as valuable as my legs. I mean, sometimes I wonder, right, what would I prefer? I used to live in California, where I used to be taxed at 50+% every year, right? I think in France, if you're at the top bracket, you still get taxed 50+% a year. What do I prefer? Having 50% of my income taken away or having my legs broken? And it's not obvious to me. 50% is a lot of money. I can do a lot of things with 50%. Fix my legs, for example. Right? A lot of things. Violence is violence is violence. It's wrong. And the whole inequality debate is hiding the fact we're naturally different, we're naturally produce different things, we're naturally going to be good at different things, we're naturally, therefore, going to have inequality. There is no way that we can't have inequality, given we're not ants. Ants may be equal. I don't know whether there's a queen in it, but everybody else is equal. We're not ants. We're each uniquely different in what makes human life interesting and what makes human relationships interesting. The fact that we are different. We're not the same. And therefore the outcome is always going to be different. And only through violence are we going to make people the same. One of the fallacies in terms of thinking about inequality is people think about it is they don't think about it as your income and your income and your income. They think about all the income in France, all the wealth in France, as a pie. You ever heard about somebody's getting a big part of the pie and somebody else is getting a small part of the pie? How are we going to divide up the national pie? I don't know if you use the same metaphor in France, but in English, that's a common metaphor. There's a pie, and we have to figure out the role of economics. Often economics is described as the science of figuring out how to allocate resources. Basically, it's a pie, and we have to figure out who gets what piece of the pie. What's the problem with the pie analogy for an economy?
Who makes the pie?
Yeah, who makes the pie? Where does the pie come from? How did the pie get here? Is there such thing as a social pie? Our pie. Wait a minute. You bake the pie, and you bake the pie, and I bake the pie, and you can squish them all together and create this big social pie. Where does that come from? By what right? So there's this collectivistic premise that individuals don't create, that individuals don't make, and that what individuals do attribute to themselves as having made or created, we can then take and lump together into this one big pie and divvy it up. And the idea of divvying it up is like, you invite some friends over pizza, you buy a pizza, you get a big pizza, and what does everybody expect? They'll get about the same size piece, right? Because we're all friends and we're all hanging out and we're all eating the pie. And therefore, once you describe this social pie, we're going, wait a minute, why haven't I got a bigger piece as you have? Why do some people get a big slice of this pie? And what's forgotten is that somebody made it. And that there is no social pie. Indeed, the whole of economics is tainted with this nonsense. When we talk about GDP, we talk about national income. Nations don't have income. Only individuals have income. But economists are not interested in individuals. So they aggregate all this data and they come up with a GDP. But GDP is not real. It's just a math thing. It's just an abstraction. There's no GDP out there. There's just your production. But once we only think in terms of GDP, well, are we going to divvy it up? It's going to get what? And we forget how it was made. The other aspect, of course, of the pie is that it's static. Right? There's a pie, and it's always this pie, and we divvy it up. And how we divvy it up doesn't affect the next pie. The pie is always there. I mean, the reality is that the pie is always growing in a free society. Why is the pie growing? How does the pie grow?
Because companies invest.
Well, companies invest, but even when we trade, the pie is actually growing. This is the beauty of trade, right? If I buy an iPhone for $1,000, how much was it worth to me? More. We know that by the fact that I was willing to give up $1,000 to get this means this is worth more than $1,000 to me. It turns out much more. So by buying the iPhone, did my pie grow? Yes. I got something worth a lot more than $1,000 to me. Right? And did Apple's pie grow? Yes, they made a profit. So both pies grew. Magic. Now, economists can't measure that. Because what does Piketty do? When I buy an iPhone, what happens to my income? What happens to my wealth? What happens to my wealth?
Decreases.
It goes down by $1,000. What happens to Apple's? It goes up. So inequality just increased. Apple got richer, I got poorer. But I didn't get poorer. I got an iPhone. I actually got richer. Every time you buy something, if you're thoughtful about it, your life should improve. So it isn't a loss of money, it's in a sense an investment in your life. When you buy food, it's an investment in your life. You couldn't survive without it. And it's worth the money you paid for it. Otherwise you wouldn't do it. So each one of our pies grows every time we trade, but economists can't even see it. All economists see is a zero-sum world. I got poorer by 1,000, you got richer by 1,000, the pie stayed exactly the same. But the real pie, in real life, grew. And economists don't know how to handle that. They don't know how to measure it. They don't know how to capture it. Like, when I say the iPhone is worth to me tens of thousands of dollars, right? It really is, given everything it can do for me. They call that consumer surplus, right? The surplus value that I gain from buying it. But nobody measures it. You can't measure it, because I can't give you a number. All I can tell you is it's more than 1,000. How much more? Each one of us is going to be different. So the whole way in which this inequality debate is conceived is wrong. It assumes static wealth, it assumes a zero-sum world, and it assumes somehow that there's an ideal out there that we're all equal. And of course, to gain that ideal that they create requires violence. There's only one sense in which equality makes sense. Equality is a concept that we can actually use and talk about. And that's not in economics. There's no value to equality when it comes to economics. It's not what you're talking about. It's just not an issue. But it is an issue in politics. It is an issue with regard to our rights, with regard to our freedom, with regard to our liberty. In that sense, we're all equal. We should all be equally protected by the law. We should all be equally treated by the law. We should all have equal rights, in a sense that if you have the right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness, everybody has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Everybody, core human being on planet Earth, has those rights. And when we don't treat people equally before the law, when we don't treat their rights as equal, that is a real issue. Now notice that the two equalities are in conflict with one another. To achieve equality of income or equality of wealth, we have to have inequality politically. Tax people at different levels, treat them differently, and therefore they're not protected by the law in the same way. They're treated completely differently by the law. So to achieve equality of outcome, to achieve equality of wealth, to achieve equality of income, we have to have inequality of politics. But that's the one area where we want equality, because we are all equal. As human beings, we're all human. We all have the capacity to take care of ourselves. We have the capacity to reason. And therefore, we all need to be left alone to live our lives as we see fit, which is the ultimate ideal of equality before the law. So, in a world that's free, inequality does not matter. In the world that's free, we're all going to be unequal. We're all going to be different. And we should celebrate that fact. I like to say that inequality is a feature of freedom, not a bug, not a problem, but a feature. It's part of what it means to be free. And indeed, when we get rid of freedom, it's only by getting rid of freedom when we achieve equality. I'll tell you a horrible story. So a long time ago, there was a group of intellectuals who came from a different country, came to Paris to study, and they studied with all your best philosophers, right? All your wonderful egalitarian leftist philosophers, and they took these ideas really seriously, and they decided that they're going to go home one day, and they're going to achieve political power, and they're going to implement these wonderful ideas of equality and egalitarianism in their country. And they actually did. They went home, and they got control of the government, and they decided they were going to establish an equal society. So they started off, and they looked at the society they had, and they said, real problems here, right? Because some people live in the city, and some people live in the countryside, and that's not equal. So what do you do? How do you make that equal? Some people live, cities have great advantages to cities. There's networking effects, there's different kind of professions. There's huge economies to living in a city. People in the countryside typically are poorer and less educated. How do you make them equal? People in the city and the people in the countryside. Making the people in the city poor, but they'll still live in a city, nice apartments. So what they did is they drove everybody out of the city. They emptied the city. They said, well, just everybody will live in the countryside. It'd be easier to keep them all equal, right? So literally, the cities became ghost towns, completely empty. Drove them out of the countryside. But now, people like to eat in the countryside, right? And what he discovered was people, some of them were better at finding food. Some of them were better farmers. Some of them had skills. Some people could read, some people couldn't. Some people were educated, some people weren't. Everywhere they looked, more inequality. So they wanted to make people equal. So what do you do about the fact that some people can read, some people can't, some people are educated, some people are not, some people are hard workers, some people are not. Some people are just better at stuff than other people. How do you solve that problem if you want to create an equal society?
Now that they are all in the countryside.
They're all in the countryside, yeah. What's that? Yeah, you encourage people to learn and stuff. That's going to take a long time. And it's still true that, some people might just be more talented, and some people just might be harder worker.
You use violence against those who are more clever or more hard workers.
So what do you do with them?
You use violence against them.
You kill them. So if you were educated, you were shot. If you could read, you were shot. They took wearing glasses as a proxy for education and reading and smarts, I guess. They shot everybody with glasses. If you were a hard worker, you were shot. They've killed 40% of their own population. Now, this is a true story. This is Cambodia. It's the killing fields in Cambodia. They started out with a population of 5 million. They killed 2 million people. You can go visit Cambodia, you can go to killing fields, and you can see the mass graves where they just shot everybody, all in the name of equality. Because why stop at wealth and why stop at income? Equality of looks. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people, again, smart, some people are not. And they took their ideas seriously. This is Pol Pot, this is the Khmer Rouge. For years, they terrorized the Cambodians. For years and years and years, only recently. And to this day, I think that there are a lot of politicians in Cambodia associated with the Khmer Rouge, because even if you do horrible things, people associate equality with something good. So even if you do horrible things, you're forgiven somehow, because the goal is good, the end is good. No, the end is evil, because the end is against metaphysical nature, it's against who we are, it's against what we are as human beings. So it is an absolute disaster. So when I think of people like the Keji, when I think of people advocating for equality, because that's what they do, by complaining about inequality, the positive is they're claiming equality. I think of the Khmer Rouge. It reminds me to get really, really angry and really, really pissed off, because that's how bad they really are. So what we fight for, what we should fight for, is freedom. It's liberty, which means equality of rights, which means the freedom of the individual to pursue his own life, to live his own life as he sees fit, based on your own judgment, based on your own mind, in pursuit of your own values. Nobody has a right to use violence against you. The state doesn't have a right to dictate your values for you. What we need is freedom, equal rights before the law, and whatever the outcome is, that is okay. Thank you. I'll take questions.
I might.
Questions on anything, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. What would you answer to someone who was born in the poorest family of the country and who think that birth inequalities are very unfair? What would you answer?
I'd say it can be unfair, so we have to be careful about language. So fairness is a moral claim. And morality only applies to human choices. It doesn't apply to facts of nature. So it's, for example, not fair that my home was hit by a hurricane and yours wasn't. It's just fact. My home was hit by a hurricane and yours wasn't. Right? It's not fair, it's not an issue of fairness that it rains on your wedding day. And you can be upset, you might not like it, you might say, it's horrible that it rained on my wedding day, but it's not a moral issue. It's not an issue of fairness. The genes you're born with are not an issue of fairness. The family you're born into is not an issue of fairness. You could complain that your genes are bad, you can complain that your family is bad, and you could look and see somebody else who has better and say, you know, this is better, but it's not a moral issue, it's not an issue of fairness. So I think the first thing is, there's no fairness in the universe. Fairness is a moral claim about human behavior. We can treat each other unfairly, right? Maradona scores a goal with his hand, and Argentina wins. That's not fair, because he cheated, right? He won in soccer. This is my limit in soccer. I don't know if you know that Maradona scored a goal once in the World Cup.
Yeah.
The hand of God, he called it. So he had a hand next to his head, hit the ball, and then he declared the hand of God. And the referee didn't see it. That's unfair, because that's human action, human choice, that's cheating. You can say, I deserve the raise, he doesn't. That's human choice. And he got the raise and I didn't. That's unfair. That relates to human choice, right? But when something is not related to human choice, it's not an issue of fairness. So what I would tell that person is, it is what it is. You've got to accept this is who you are. The question is, what are you going to do with it? And if you want to live in a society where, in spite of the fact that you were born, let's say, with worse genes or worse parents, you can still have a good life, you can still do well, you need freedom. That is, a society in which we have freedom, not equality, but actual freedom, is a society where you have the opportunity to pursue your happiness. Maybe not the same opportunities as I did or you do, but you have the most opportunities you're going to have in any society. And you're creating a society where everybody has that opportunity. So it's by far the best society, even for you. I think when you start giving people money that they haven't earned, that they claim only because they don't have it, you're actually taking away opportunities from them. You're taking opportunities from them to be proud of the fact that they could earn money. You're taking away the opportunity to find a job that they love and can benefit from. You're, in a sense, telling them implicitly, you will never be successful. You depend on me, depend on the state, or depend on whoever to survive. You're denying them the opportunity to be fully human. So I think the welfare state denies people the opportunity to be fully human, and is an injustice towards them. Even though I know it's hard for them to see it, because right now they need help.
What got you into Ayn Rand and not Hayek or Friedman or Mises? Why was it Rand in particular?
First, because Rand is the first one I read. But I think the big difference between Rand and Hayek and Mises and the others is that Rand is a philosopher, and they are not. And I think philosophy sits at the base of all human knowledge. It's what you need to do science, it's what you need to do economics, it's what you need to do all these other things. And philosophy is what you need for life. To know how to live a good life, you need morality, you need epistemology, you need philosophical guidance. I think a problem that libertarians have, and I think most libertarians have, is they think everything's about politics and economics. And very little there is about politics and economics. Most of life you live with yourself, and you live with a few people around you. And how you treat yourself, and how you deal with the world and reality, and how you deal with the people around you, is in the end going to be more determinant of your ability to be happy, and be successful, and be prosperous than what happens in the economy and in politics. So while I think, obviously, politics and economics are important, much more important is kind of the morality and philosophical. I think also libertarians have a problem, which is you try to justify capitalism, freedom, based on, a lot of people, Rothbard and others, start with the non-aggression principle. Well, where does the non-aggression principle come from? He knows. And the fact is, maybe Rothbard has some ambiguous self-ownership thing, but the fact is that 99.9% of humanity throughout all of history has no problem with violence, as long as it's for a good cause. Most moral systems believe in violence, as long as it's for a good cause. They define what a good cause is, of course. So, in order to actually achieve freedom, to achieve liberty, we have to convince people of the right morality so that they, want to be free. Most people don't want to be free, I think. Most people want to be told what to do. So they have to first want to be free. And second, we have to convince them that it's moral to be free. What if it's immoral to pursue your own happiness? What you really should be doing is sacrifice for the sake of other people. well then maybe socialism is not a bad idea. Sacrifice. A lot of sacrifice goes on in socialism. So morality dictates politics. It's like, politics flows from culture, or culture flows from philosophy. Without philosophy, nothing matters. As soon as you have a philosophy, everything else is determined. So the real battle, in my view, is a moral battle. The real battle is a philosophical battle, not an economic battle. And that's why I think Rand is more important than these other thinkers. She's also more consistent than, let's say, Hayek, who constantly compromises with the free market. Friedman, who also is a compromiser on many of the free market issues. Rand is consistent. The economist who's most like her is Mises. But Mises, too, tries to get into philosophy. He's not very good at it. He should have left that time. Plus, I wrote novels, and novels are very, she wrote 4 novels, but, and she wrote nonfiction. But Atlas Shrugged is I encourage you to read it, The Fountainhead. Just great books, they're fun to read, and you get captured by the characters in the world, and philosophical ideas also conveyed, and that combination is very enticing. It's probably the biggest way in which people come to the ideas of liberty, is through animist fiction. In most of the world, not in France, at least. Any question?
I think my question was related to what you were saying before.
Yeah.
In a situation when we talk about, people shouldn't get free money when they could actually learn how to make such money. So what would you say about scholarship? In terms in France now, to apply for a scholarship, they give you based on your parents' income, things like that. So if they think you're poor, you get the scholarship. So would you say such practices should be abolished, or do you say everyone should have the right to scholarships?
So I would say that ultimately those kind of programs should be abolished. I wouldn't abolish them now. I think there are a lot of other things that should be abolished before them because of all the programs and all the redistribution and all the distortion that the government creates in the economy. This is the least destructive. But ultimately in a free society, if you want a scholarship, then individuals should give you a scholarship. That is, you should apply to somebody who's giving away his own money. See, the only way the government can get money to give somebody a scholarship is by taking it from me. I might give you a scholarship, and I might create a foundation to give a scholarship, or I might contribute to a charity that gives scholarships, and I would. I think it's a really good cause, right? But it should be voluntary. What we're trying, what an ideal society looks like is a society in which people interact with one another on a voluntary basis. And I think such a society is super generous. I think it helps poor people, particularly if they're poor because of no fault of their own, particularly if they're poor but they're trying to rise up. I think society would be people are very generous generally. I think people are very generous to kids who can't afford to get an education, can't afford to go to university, and I think there would be plenty of scholarships in a free society. I just don't think the government should have anything to do with it. Because again, the government can only break legs. The government can only get money by taking it from others. Right? It doesn't produce anything. So, again, as long as it's voluntary, I think it's great.
One question about the UK. The UK is more economically free than France.
Yeah.
Why is there such an economical crisis there and not as much in France right now at this time?
Well, I think because you are part of the European Union, and more importantly, you're part of the euro. So with all the problems of the euro, what the euro does is it gives you stability. So you don't have an economic crisis, but you also don't have great economy when things are good. You're just mediocre. mean, what's true about France is just mediocre, it's just flat, it's just boring. Right? You have a boring economy. And that's because you basically got German central bankers, right? It doesn't matter who the central bank is, essentially you got Bundesbank, right? So you've got a euro that is basically super conservative. So you still have inflation, but you probably have less inflation than the US or the UK. Because your monetary policy is a little bit more conservative than the US and UK. Now, saying that, on the other hand, the last 10 years, the European Central Bank has behaved kind of stupidly and ridiculously in creating negative interest rates and supporting negative interest rates all over Europe. So I think things are going to get bad for you.
That's nice.
I think you're heading towards a recession. I think France will be in a recession. I think Germany's already in a recession.
Spain, maybe.
What's that?
Spain?
Spain. The whole European Union bloc will probably be in recession early next year, as the US and the UK. But the UK has its own currency. It's its own bank. It's much more volatile. But at the end, it actually achieves more. But the downs are bigger and the ups are bigger because you have a more volatile policy. Right? So Europe is kind of stable and boring, but also not a lot of potential in the upside.
But things are worsening.
But it is interesting that France does as well as it does. I mean, I would have expected France to do much worse than it is doing,
But
given the economic policies.
also in France, they're tracking the numbers a lot because through debts. And now they did during the COVID crisis guaranteed loan through the state, prêt garanti d'État, where they give loans to people, and the government is responsible for 90% of the debt.
Yeah, but
And
that's
it's
true
not-
in all
it's-
countries.
It's not counted into the numbers right now. So they
Well, but it's counted because it's new money that's being printed, it affects inflation. It's there, but all countries do that. America did it, the UK did it. So I don't think the French are fudging the numbers any more than any other country. I just think you have an economy that's less volatile because you have less upside. So you also, in a sense, have less downside. You're already stagnating. It's not like France is growing very fast. It's a pretty stagnant economy. It is surprising that you have done as well as you have done over the last 30 years, given the economic policies that you have. And I think most of that is the benefits of the European Union. And that means that you've got free trade with the rest of Europe. I mean, people underestimate how important free trade is. I think one of the reasons UK is suffering right now, it's because, they left the European Union, so they don't have free trade anymore. And that's a real cost of the economy that is going to be very, very. They said, oh, we'll have free trade deals with the rest of the world, and we'll cut a good deal with Europe. None of that has happened, right? None of it. They said, we will deregulate, we'll get rid of all the regulations Brussels imposed on us. They didn't get rid of a single regulation. So they got all the bad of the European Union without any of the good. So no free movement of capital, goods, and labor, which is what makes the European Union, they don't have. So that's why they're in particular suffering right now. It's all a consequence of Brexit. Of course, they'll never admit it because they want to pretend that Brexit was a good idea.
But why didn't they just sign a free trade treaty with the European Union?
Because the European Union didn't want to sign it with them.
Okay.
Because the European Union wanted to penalize the UK for leaving, so they wouldn't sign a free trade agreement with them. But what they should have done, I mean, this is my advice to every government in the world, lower tariffs to zero.
lower
Tariffs to zero. I don't care what the other party does. If they want to tax their own citizen, then that's unfortunate. That's no good, and they won't buy as much of my stuff. But why should I tax my citizens? I want my people to get good, cheap stuff. So lower tariffs to zero. And the amount of economic growth that you will experience in your own country if you did that And that would actually create competition for other countries to lower their tariffs, because they would see how well it works. But nobody listens to me. One of my great frustrations in life. But yes, what the UK should have done is made themselves a free trade island and said, in the UK there are no tariffs. You can sell anything into this country, no cost.
And it would have cornered the wealthiest.
And you know, every aspect of what they did. So immigration-wise, you know, people complained about all these workers coming from Europe, particularly Eastern Europe, Poland, places like that, and so-called taking jobs from English people. And so we wanted Brexit to stop the immigrants coming. Right? But England needs those jobs, so there's a labor shortage. So what they're doing is they're allowing people to come from all the former British colonies. So you've got Pakistanis and Indians and Nigerians, and they're all coming, but no Europeans. You know, so I'm all for immigration, so I think it's good that they're coming, but why not increase the pool of people who can come, not decrease the pool of people who can come? And then free movement of capital is a real problem for the banks. You know, all the big international banks have headquarters in London. London was the financial center of Europe, second financial center to the world after New York. Is it still going to be in 5 years? Now that free movement of capital is restricted? It was a huge mistake, given that they didn't have a plan for what they were going to do afterwards.
Yeah, my question was going to be, if the problem that the UK is facing right now is in terms of like money and things like that, they have their own money. I just don't understand why they can't print some money. I don't know how, like...
Well, you can. You can print more money, but then you have inflation. So the more money you print, the more inflation you get. So this is the problem with money, is that you can't, it's not magic. So money has to correspond to production. In a sense, money has to be produced. And so when you give politicians a printing press with money, they just print more money. That's what happened during COVID. Everybody in the world printed money. Now we have inflation. Because if you have a set number of goods and you have more money chasing after the same number of goods, people bid up their prices. So if I have $5 in 5 goods, I spend $1 in each good. Now suddenly, let's say I printed more money, now there's $10. Still only 5 goods. Now I'm going to spend $2 on every good. So the price went up. So there are no gimmicks. There's no easy way out. But that's exactly what we did in COVID. All the government said, we're going to lock you at home, we're not going to allow you to go, we're not going to allow you to work, but we'll give you money. We'll print money. And now we've got inflation as a consequence of that. Yeah.
Are you optimistic about the battle of ideas for freedom? Because right now, I think we're far away from the ideas that I learned of family. So are you optimistic or?
Well, it depends on what time frame you have. So, am I optimistic over the next 10 years? No. 20 years? No. 30 years? Not so much. At some point, I'm optimistic, but it's pretty far in the future. No, I'm not optimistic right now. I mean, look, there is not a single politician in the world right now that I know of who believes in free markets.
There's Yaron Brook. He's still
And Paul became a Trumpist. I don't believe he believes in anything anymore. So he used to, but I mean, there's a few, right? There's a handful, but nobody of significance. Nobody who dominates their political party. Nobody who leads a political party. The right has become statist. It's become anti-capitalist. It's become anti-free market, pro-central planning. I see libertarians in the United States cheering on Putin. I see SFL, chapters of SFL cheering on Putin. There's no consistency. There's no philosophical foundation for the ideas of liberty. So while I think the movement, in a sense, is growing, so the objectivism, my grand's ideas are growing, and I think freedom ideas, liberty ideas are growing internationally, it's still growing so slowly that it's not having a significant impact on the culture. And the right, Trump, I think, did a huge damage to the right by making the right populist, by making the right more concerned about social issues, and the wrong social issues now, right? I mean, libertarians are now anti-abortion, which is nuts. Libertarians are anti-immigration. How can you be anti-immigration and be a libertarian? So it's completely insane, and the reason it's insane goes back to the question earlier, is because without philosophy you have no anchor, and without philosophy you're going to come up with all kinds of crazy ideas. So you need philosophy to ground your defense of liberty. Then you can hold on to it. And until Ayn Rand becomes popular, ideas of freedom and liberty are not going to be successful, because Ayn Rand's the only one of the philosophers. I mean, a philosophy that challenges 2,000 years of philosophical thinking in the West, challenges everything, Christianity.
Recently, I've read the book of Hoppe. He said the libertarian should Hans-Hermann Hoppe.
Oh, Hoppe.
He said we should stand with Trump and the Tea Party because it's closer from our political ideas than Biden and.
So I've never liked Hoppe. I think he's horrible. This is the problem with libertarians, unfortunately. Trump is not close to our ideas. Not if you understand what liberty is. Not when you understand what freedom is. He's not close to our ideas. He's further away. For example, he's anti-immigration. Now, Hoppe is anti-immigration. But how Hoppe can be a libertarian and anti-immigration, again, I think those are completely inconsistent points of view. Trump is anti-free speech. He used to constantly threaten the media. If they didn't behave, if he had the power, he would shut them down. And luckily, he didn't have the power, but he could have. Nothing about Trump was pro-freedom. Nothing about Biden is pro-freedom. But you don't have to take a stand. You don't have to be with either one of them. But the problem is that many libertarians became pro-Trump, and I think they're sold to the devil. And it's gone. It's gone.
Because for me, for instance, I'm really into you've heard of the Great Reset, Klaus Schwab theory, that they want to implement and create a world progressive governance, and like Putin and Trump, they're the only opposition right now to.
So you do not want to be oppressed by a world government.
Yes.
What you want to be is oppressed by your local dictator.
Sometimes I think it might be better.
No, much easier world government. Because a world government will be inefficient, ineffective, it'll be a disaster. And let me tell you, and I'll make a prediction now, it'll never happen. Never happen. I mean, you can't even create one government in Europe. You won't give the Brussels legislative power, right? You won't create a United States of Europe. So you think you're going to get the Americans and the Mexicans and the Brazilians and the Chinese all under one government? Never happen. The much bigger threat is Putin and Trump than that idiot Klaus, whatever his name is, with that horrible German accent, in the World Economic Forum. The Great Reset is, a lot of talking. Trump and Putin, they'll put a gun to your head and pull the trigger.
Or they put the jab, yeah.
So I'm much more afraid of the authoritarian left and right, locally, than I am of a world government, because I don't think it can ever happen. And I'm afraid of the catastrophizing of global warming. I'm afraid of ESG. Those are issues that can be fought, and there's a lot of backlash against them. But you don't need Trump for that. You don't need mindless stupidity, and you don't need authoritarianism for it. You just need to fight on the basis of ideas. But would you rather live today in Germany or in Russia? I mean, it's a no-brainer. If you value your personal freedom, it's a no-brainer. You'd much rather live in Germany than in Russia. And it's not an accident that Russia is about 25% it's 75% poorer than Germany on a per capita basis. Right? So you'd be poorer, no freedom of speech. Putin won't tolerate it. And if you piss him off too much, he'll poison you and kill you, put you in jail. You can't demonstrate. I mean, it's not even close. I'd much rather live in Germany. Germans have what, a leftist government right now. I'll take German leftists over Putin any day.
But sometimes it's hard to totally understand what you're saying, but sometimes it's hard to stand for freedom, even in Europe. Like for instance, I got kicked out from my PhD for just talking about bad things about the government. And
but in Russia, the same thing would happen.
yeah, it's just a degree, but what would you advise young people like us to?
Well, France is particularly bad. Leave France. Don't go to somewhere worse. So I'm all for improving your own condition in life, and what you should care about primarily is you as an individual, not some theoretical thing, right? So where in the world are you going to be best off? Where in the world can you experience the most freedom? And again, it's not Russia, and it's not Trump's America. So I hate cancel culture, and I hate woke, right? But the solution to that is not to have cancel culture of the right. And you do. If you go to a conservative conference and you talk about immigration, they will boo you off the stage. Just like the left does on certain issues. It's just a question of what issues you do. So what you want is your personal freedom. You want to find a place where you can actually live free. I'm sure there are places in the world.
And where for you, where would it be?
I live in Puerto Rico. So, because it's still America, but it's not quite. It's neither here nor there. But, America's still relatively free. The UK is more free than it is here, certainly in certain respects. What's that? Switzerland, both tax-wise and economic-wise, and I think free speech-wise, is quite free. I think even a place like, even Scandinavia, in many respects is freer than it is here. Economically, certainly, and even when it comes to speech, I think parts of Scandinavia are freer. Even the Netherlands. Netherlands has a long tradition of free speech, of intellectual tolerance. And they have lockdowns, but I think there's more of a debate there. There's more of a discussion. You just need to look around. There are no easy answers because the world, it sucks right now, and things are moving against us. But the solution to it sucks that now things are moving against us is not Putin. It can't be violence, and it can't be less freedom. It has to be more freedom. And Putin will not give you more freedom, he will give you less freedom all the time. He has no interest in freedom, so he has interest in power.
I might have one last question and then we'll finish late. What do you think about the European countries' great replacement here in a libertarian point of view?
So I don't worry about the whole great replacement theory. I find even the terminology offensive. I think there is an issue with the welfare state and mass migration. It's very difficult to sustain a welfare state if you have mass migration. But the solution to that is primarily to get rid of the welfare state. One of the reasons you find people, often from very, very poor countries, swarming into Europe when there's a civil war, let's say in Syria, is because you give them money immediately. You provide them with welfare. You don't provide them with jobs, God forbid, right? You don't integrate them into your society, but you give them a check and you send them out to the neighborhoods far, far away so you don't have to see them. So you can pretend you still live in a I don't know. So I would say that the problem with immigration in Europe today is the fault of Europeans. And it's the fault of not allowing and not encouraging assimilation, which I think is what should be done. People should be assimilated. Not encouraging immigrants to find jobs, because work is the best way in which people assimilate. I mean, people leave the countries that they leave because they want a better life. Europe has the opportunity to provide that better life. They don't come here to destroy. They come here to embrace the life, mostly, right? And, we need to embrace that. So, I find the idea of replacement theory just unbelievably offensive, because it assumes that the different types of people and one type of person is going to replace another type of person. And the way we determine the type is by race, or by genes, or by country of origin.
Religion.
Or religion. Now, religion can be a problem when religion is associated with violence, but religion in and of itself is not the business of God. It's not the business. So it's religion, color skin, something like that, and it's anti-freedom, it's anti-liberty. I find it particularly offensive when people who claim to be pro-liberty take these stands. We should encourage people to come to Europe. We should provide them with jobs, and we should encourage them to assimilate, not to live in their own neighborhoods, but to assimilate into our lives. And when we do that, it works phenomenally well. What happens? France has a great culture, right? It has a history of great arts and great music and great culture. And let's say we agree that it's some of the best in the world, right? We don't want to lose that. Well, if it's so good, then be confident about it and encourage the new people who come in to embrace it, to make it their own. Because loving music is not an issue of the color of your skin. Loving painting and sculpture is not an issue of the color of your skin. If France really has great culture, anybody should be able to see it, no matter what their religious background. Well, religion is ideas, but at least not, their genes don't determine their attitude towards culture, painting, and great music. So, great literature. France maybe is best known, should be best known for their literature. We have Hugo after all. I forgive you a lot of things. I forgive you Rousseau because you have Hugo. So is the devil. But so it's. We had the same problem in the U.S. They use the same. I mean, Tucker Carlson, the most watched person on television in the U.S., uses replacement theory constantly on the show, and it's disgusting. Mexicans and displacers. Who's us? Who are you talking about? They're going to take your job, Tucker? I mean, well, what are they going to do? They're going to trade with you. They're going to become productive members of our community, and we're going to trade with one another. How is that replacing you? You don't like it because they have dark skin? It's really racist, without admitting the fact that they're racist.
I noticed that when I argue with friends at a drink or something else about inequalities, for example, it's all about emotions.
It's all about emotions.
Yeah, they are trying to make me cry about the situation of somebody, and they make a storytelling. Yeah. And I find that it's very hard to make a storytelling. Like I can say that if we withdraw to Bernard or Bill Gates or Elon Musk billions, they will be sad or poor. It's not the truth. They will be will still live healthier and with a lot of money. Yeah. But so it's very hard to make a storytelling about all of that things. And
this is why the battle is philosophical. Is the battle, the challenge is a philosophical battle. Yeah. And part of the philosophical battle is what matters. And this is the. If we can't make the case that what matters is reason, rationality, exactly. Facts, evidence, then we'll never win. But that's a philosophical claim, right? Rousseau was not for reason, not in the sense that we understand. He was for emotion. Even though he was of the age of reason, but that's part of the conflict between him and the encyclopedists, right? So, but reason is the standard, and we need to be able to think in principles, and we need to be able to think. And you can't just think in stories. Stories are important. Stories are great. But they're only great in the sense that they help us understand the principle. So whenever somebody tells you a story, look for the principle behind it. But if they're not willing to think about principles, if they're ignoring principles, if all they want is the emotion, there's nothing you can do with it. You can't convince them, you can't change their mind, because their mind is not what's working. So argumentation, debate, discussion is about ideas, and it needs to be done using reason, using rational argument. And we teach today at our universities, at our schools, we elevate emotion as if it's cognition. And that's the fundamental problem. You know, Ayn said she was for capitalism in politics because she was pro what's called rational egoism in morality. But she was pro rational egoism in morality because she was an advocate for reason. That it all starts with really advocacy for reason. This is why the Enlightenment, the Age of Reason, led to the Industrial Revolution and led to all the wealth we have today. And now, as we abandon reason, and again, you French are a big part of the responsibility for why, because it's you and the Germans who came up with postmodernism and expressionism and all these emotionalist philosophers. And when you have an emotionalist philosophy, forget liberty and freedom. You need guidance, you need a dictator, you need somebody you need a philosopher king to tell you how to do it.
About principles, on the French political scene, there are less and less ideological parties. If you look, before there was the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, and so there was the name of the ideology in the party.
Yes.
And actually, with En Marche, Emmanuel Macron's party, they try to put aside ideology.
Yes.
So I maybe agree with some of the things they do, but it's like there is no more ideology.
I agree with you, and it's not just in France, it's everywhere, right? So Democrats and Republicans don't have ideology anymore. They're all pragmatists.
Yeah.
They're all, the term is pragmatism. It's an actual philosophical movement from the US, and it basically says there's no such thing as principles. You do what works, and it's all short run. There's no long term. Long term doesn't matter, and they follow their own principles. And you should never function by principle, only by what works. Yeah. And that's American political life. That's European political life. And there's very few ideologues even arguing for principles anymore. Now that's how civilization is done. Because it is a battle of ideas, it is about principles. Liberty, freedom is a principle. And once you become pragmatic about it, then you give up liberty and freedom. That's exactly what's going on. Trump once was caught in a lie, and he was doing an interview and the woman said, yeah, but you said this, and it was a lie. And he said, but it worked. That's all he cares about. That's pure pragmatism. And there's never been a president more pragmatic than Trump. He doesn't believe in anything. He could change his mind like that, right? One day, the dictator of North Korea was a monkey and a clown, and what do you call him? And then the next day, we're best friends. We've got a romance going on with the dictator of North Korea. And the fact that the guy is murdering people and killing people and destroying, he still has a romance with him. It's just, that's pragmatism. There's no principle, no thinking, and that's the world in which we live. People don't want to think in principle. They don't want to be ideological. They associate principle with bad. Because fascism and communism are bad, and those are the only principles they can think of. But we forget that freedom and liberty are also principles.
Some libertarians say that it's the principle of democracy